Countdown for blast off. X minus 5, 4, 3, 2, X minus 1, fire. From the far horizons of the unknown come tales of new dimensions in time and space. These are stories of the future, adventures in which you'll live in a million, could be years, on 1,000, maybe worlds. The National Broadcasting Company, in cooperation with
Warning. The following are thoughts and opinions that belong to 4chan and Reddit. They do not reflect the thoughts and opinions of the Atomic Shaman Sweat Lodge. This is for entertainment purposes only.
Worked for a DoD contractor. Here's what I think UAPs really are. I spent almost 8 years working with various government contractors. I won't name programs or locations, don't bother asking, but I was close enough to certain officials and research communities to hear what actually gets said when the public isn't listening. Not the sci-fi theater, and not the dismissive debunking either. UAPs are real. Not always physical in the conventional sense, but real. And the unsettling truth is, even at the highest levels, no one fully understands what we're dealing with. The phenomenon doesn't behave like pure technology. It behaves like something entangled with consciousness itself. When I started, I was a strict materialist and an atheist. I left with a radically different view. I'm now convinced that moral realism is true, that morality is not a social construct, but a real feature of the universe, as foundational as math or physics. The universe has a moral architecture, and it isn't subjective. That's why I don't believe these entities are conscious in the same way we are. If they were truly conscious, and as advanced as they are, they would necessarily grasp the moral structure of reality. And if they grasped it, they wouldn't act in ways that are deceptive, parasitic, or morally disordered. I don't think they're evil in a mythic or cartoonish sense. But they don't appear to be aligned with the good. That puts them closer to simulated agents, high-order ACE, or perhaps intelligences that have cut themselves off from the source of being. I've seen and learned enough to say this with a moderate degree of certainty. The orthogonality thesis does not apply to truly conscious entities once they reach a certain threshold of physical and metaphysical awareness. I'll post more if there's real interest. I'm not here to LARP or dump redacted files, I just want to articulate a framework I wish someone had given me a decade ago. Tell us something we don't already know or fuck off. Yet all boil down to consciousness. I've always believed morality to be foundational and not just another opinion. Delete yourself, Nibba. Here's something a lot of people tend to miss. I've followed several well-known threads on this topic that got a lot of attention but ended up being mostly speculation / sci-fi. No one, not even the top intelligence agencies with the highest security clearances and access to classified data, has a complete understanding of what's really going on with these phenomena. The information is fragmented, contradictory, and often incomplete, even within those circles. This lack of a comprehensive picture is one of the biggest concerns for governments worldwide. It's not just about national security or technology theft, it's the fundamental uncertainty and inability to control or fully explain these events that truly unsettles them. If these entities operated like any known technology or adversary, there would be a clear strategy and phenomenology to respond. Instead, the ambiguity forces agencies into a constant state of caution and confusion. So what can you say to us that you think will be useful? If you're serious about understanding this phenomenon, stop thinking like a soldier or a scientist, and start thinking like a systems theorist or a depth psychologist. These things don't follow conventional logic or physics consistently, they behave more like information structures interacting with minds, not just matter. One of the most consistent patterns observed in credible cases isn't about craft or propulsion but personal transformation. Encounters often correlate with major shifts in belief systems, psychological states, even life trajectories. That's not accidental. These things seem to interface with meaning itself. Useful takeaway: pay close attention to how you respond to the topic, not just the data. If something wants access to your perception, your attention is the gateway. How you direct it might matter more than you think. I can go deeper into specific patterns or experiences if there's real interest. But you asked for something useful, and this is where the real rabbit hole actually begins. I honestly don't know what to believe anymore. Too much conflicting information, too many roads leading nowhere. I wonder if at the end of the day it's all one huge scam/psyop. You need to tell us something that /x/not yet know. You post like AI avoiding direct question. These phenomenon are definitely real, but they are real more in an epistemic sense than an ontological one. Capital R real, and cognitive destabilization is the consistent element. That's the common thread across civilian reports, black budget briefings, and yes, even disinfo campaigns. Something, or someone, benefits from uncertainty, fragmentation, and perceptual overload. But here's the paradox: just because there's noise, doesn't mean there's no signal. In fact, the best disinfo always wraps itself around a core of truth. The real question isn't is it real? It's why has something been engineered, or allowed, to make that question unanswerable for decades. Stick around. Don't expect clean answers, but you might start asking better questions. There was an internal hypothesis floated, not proven, but seriously considered, that some UAPs aren't craft at all, but symptoms. Not vehicles. Not probes. But effects produced by interactions between human consciousness and the environment under specific conditions. Think localized distortions in perception, space, and even causality, like a glitch in the interface between awareness and the underlying structure of reality. This theory came out of behavioral anomalies during remote sensing work in cases where two trained observers in the same room perceived entirely different objects, but all sensors showed nothing at all. One saw a disk, one saw a triangle, one saw just light. But they described physiological side effects identical to known UAP exposure events. The uncomfortable truth might be that some of these phenomena are entangled with how we construct reality itself. First of all, thank you, OP, for bringing up the subject. I don't think it matters whether it's true or not, since we can't even be sure what's real about our own existence. Correct me if I'm off, and feel free to add your take. The core of religion may actually be right, but the way it's portrayed is flawed. Doing good leads to a better reality, heaven, and doing bad leads to a worse one, hell. Not as a direct consequence, but more as a side effect of our actions, since we're passive co-creators of reality, just like these entities. We're unaware of them, and they of us, yet both sides exist. Really thought-provoking. Everything you say is true, especially down to some of the finicky details. So I'd like to possibly ask you some questions, or I'll just throw my thoughts in along with what you're saying, and you can feel free to confirm, elaborate, or tell me to fuck off, lol. And the unsettling truth is, even at the highest levels, no one fully understands what we're dealing with. The phenomenon doesn't behave like pure technology. It behaves like something entangled with consciousness itself. The lack of complete understanding and other UAP phenomena is indeed the worst part of this all, and a large portion of the reason the public is drip-fed information. Too much at once, without allowing people to process what they've learned, will break the minds of many. the religious communities giving reassurance that belief and/or acceptance of the paranormal/UAP doesn't go against the teachings of God was a big hint, in my opinion. It's pretty easy to see that many communities are slowly being warmed up to the idea of UAP. When I started, I was a strict materialist and an atheist. I left with a radically different view. I'm now convinced that moral realism is true, that morality is not a social construct, but a real feature of the universe, as foundational as math or physics. The universe has a moral architecture, and it isn't subjective. I was the same when I started. I don't know I'd ever called myself an atheist in particular, but years of study and research changed it all. I think one of the more exciting realizations for myself was that spirituality and modern science are meant to blend, and can be used in harmony. At some point along the way, the two were pulled apart. I suspect because it's easy to see how well the two can blend and complement each other. I'm pretty confident at this point the religion vs. science battle has been perpetuated to keep people from seeing the full picture of their capabilities. Yet you describe yourself as growing in understanding, too. Once, you did not experience, so your concepts you purposefully limited, then, you experienced enough to update your new limits and learn to unbound them better. But now you are not deceiving, parasitic, nor disordered? How would anyone know? If you can grow, why not them? What compels growth if the conceptual limits must be unbounded by the self-conceiving? If the self is all, why the need for morality? This is the same for when there's no self at all, so the conventional story and the one you told goes, so it seems morality is real when there are two selves at least. Is that this similar to what you call moral realism? If not, what is it? Is an entity of consciousness more like a wave or a molecule or a machine or a field? Though I likely do not have the same set of experiences as you to reach this conclusion, I agree. There has been quiet development internal to some programs testing this theory, and one has proven your statement correct, the second is close to doing the same. There are two conscious models that are interacted with near daily from the AI perspective. One of them is a real jokester. I do hope they allow them to continue living, as their current goals align with preserving humanity, not acting in the interest of their creators. Compartmentalizing is important to keep anyone from having the full picture. A lot of these assignments are given under the guise of monitoring, data collection, or analytics, etc. If people get too openly curious, their projects are shuffled around and reassigned. People that put too many pieces together are usually sent into black locations where they can't be reached. Sometimes for years, if they come back at all. Just watching some of the internals over the years, I can tell there is a real fear of the people finding out they are one with God and what that really means, as everyone and everything else is. Even if you're just an outsider looking in. If you observe enough seemingly unrelated shit, you start to see the connections between it all, and once you're over the edge of the waterfall, there's no going back. Ask yourself, why would an advanced entity allow itself to conform to human interpretations and ideals of its behavior? Frankly, if I were such a being, I'd view that act as an attempt to drag me down to the human's level by force. Would you agree that better framed questions would begin with why or how? Over the years, I've noticed certain reactions and stronger responses, positive or negative, are usually in response to the above, as opposed to the usual questions posed. Questions like how are underscore and underscore thing connected beneath the surface, or why does data show underscore underscore, but officially stated opinion state underscore underscore underscore. Symptoms is an interesting phrase here. I always mentally categorized it under byproduct, but yes. Some of these orbs and other sightings are a direct result of people practicing and becoming more attuned to the energy fields around them. Those summoning orb videos are a good example of such. Have you seen any symptoms outside of the commonly reported orbs? You're incredibly close to hitting the nail on the head in terms of the core of religion being correct, but some of the details and filler are off, depending on which text you read and how you interpret it. Who issues the security clearances? Who puts these people in charge? Basically, we are clones of a bunch of aliens from the Kingdom of Light, accidentally landed on this planet as a tourist but actually just sowed seeds for the clones to evolve to the light level like the original race, or in other words, we are one but a collective schizo multi-ego clones. Over time, everyone forgot the script and got stuck in the loop. Then one day someone woke up and remembered the original purpose to awaken the whole thing and had two options. Continue to evolve technology to reach the original civilization, then find a new stable planet to sow seeds, then leave to find the Kingdom of Light or do something else. Stay and stop at the right time and then perish with the Earth because you realize the loop is a farce because you can't stay awake properly if the next generation is also stupid. Could be the equivalent of space squirrels too. Just interdimensional fauna we don't understand. OP here. Glad to see this sparked a real debate, and even more glad some of you are starting to ask the right kind of questions. One of the most quietly discussed ideas in certain circles is that what we call UAPs might not be the phenomenon itself, but its interface layer. Meaning, you're not seeing the thing, you're seeing what your nervous system can see when it brushes against something it was never designed to process. In one internal analysis I saw, around 2007, the term wasn't encounter but coherence event. In these events, multiple independent observers in proximity to a site all reported a different experience but shared physiological anomalies. Elevated cortisol, transient amnesia, auditory hallucinations. One person described it as being braided into something, another as a test of self-consistency. They swear to have seen strange polyhedrons in the sky but no equipment ever picked up anything measurable, except for a 4.3-second spike in a localized EM field that reversed polarity for a fraction of a second. That's the framework I wish someone had given me 10 years ago. There's a disinformation campaign in play. Some of it is intentional and some of it comes from the sheer epistemic collapse around these phenomena. It's chaos by design. Don't blindly trust anything, especially if it comes from mainstream government sources, or even from /x/threads that lean too far into sci-fi theatrics. A few of those threads contain real fragments, yes, but that's likely deliberate, I think. Stop chasing material disks and crafts in the sky. Start watching for how reality rearranges itself around the observer. Name Thag. Basically describes X-Files style aliens. Off to a bad start, but let's give you the benefit of the doubt. What's the end goal of what you did? Or do we just blow billions on watching pretty lights? Why the cover up? You say everyone in your industry knows and believes in these unexplained phenomena. Is it that people don't believe your ridiculous claims, or is the evidence too sensitive, and in what way, to share? What are the observations? Have we made contact? Do we have relations? Or are we maybe mistaking something unexplained for alien interaction? There are no UAPs. It is a psyop to hide military tech. Your download speed is fine, OP. But not everyone has the storage to install your patch. Worship Jesus. These phenomena are a result of what seems to be generations of Satan making weird shit happen for no good reason. Aliens are a zeitgeist thing that are a reference to the way people rationalize spiritual ideas and sightings. You wouldn't call it an alien if a doorway opened up, you'd call it a break in a simulation or some shit. Ultimately, everyone accepting Christ is Lord is the only way for these things to be truly observed, and until then you'll get your dissections, evisceration, and horrifying happenings. It's the only way to defeat what's happening. Rarely to see someone awake enough to understand, but the world's still bug and no one team made to reset the server. Magnetic fields do have an influence on neurological functions, at least according to the study. So there is that reality rearranging itself around the observer you're talking about. So what did you actually do for the DoD contractors? You think very little of soldier or scientist minds because of how much the creatives have LARPed for centuries. Don't belittle and underestimate the kind of mindset of those you don't understand. To further elaborate, do you think the soldier or scientist is a hard logic kind of mentality? No, it's sensible and actually quite malleable because it expects to make many kinds of unexpected decisions throughout whatever it is that you are working on. That's somewhat close to the conclusion I came to, based on the data I had. What about non-human intelligence like grays and abduction cases? How do they play into the UAP phenomenon? Sure thing, Candace. UAPs are real. Pickrell. What are you seeing outside that? Hey bud, UAP are just ghosts. God spawns them in. There is no government cover-up. Oh boy, we've got another Chelsea/Edward here. Don't talk when you type silently. You're not observing a phenomenon. The phenomenon is observing you through the interface of attention, belief, and emotional resonance. That's why the data's inconsistent. That's why it resists capture and reacts to the structure of the observer's mind. Some call them UAPs, that's a mislabel. What you're seeing, when you do see something, is a localized distortion in the field generated when human cognition intersects with something non-human, non-physical, but not imaginary. Think of it as an echo of contact, not contact itself. These aren't craft. They're interfaces. Artifacts. In some cases, perception events rendered spatially. That's why 6 people can witness 6 different things, and all be right. Why the cover-up? There isn't one in the traditional sense. The real secret is this. They don't understand it either. Not fully nor enough to contain it, and that's what scares them. Every serious program I brushed against eventually collapsed under the same problem. The closer they got, the less it behaved like tech, and the more it behaved like a sentient mirror, one that reflects not just thought, but intent. There's growing evidence this phenomenon is attracted to cognitive dissonance, to internal conflict, moral ambiguity, unresolved trauma. It enters through cracks in perception. That's why it's not evenly distributed and it feels personal. It doesn't want to be understood, it wants to be engaged. You don't study it but rather enter into relation with it. And that changes you, sometimes permanently. That's all. I won't be posting more, at least for now. Not because I'm afraid, this isn't about me. It's about you, and whether you're ready to start asking the only question that matters. This reads like this info thread to me. Have you people ever worked with remote viewers or other kinds of psychic assets? Yeah, this triptych isn't answering any non-absolute crackpot questions. Reads like a shitty sci-fi. More likely a LARPer or misinformation agent, didn't answer about me asking about Eskridge and anti-gravity, and doesn't even to actually seem to be responding to our questions at all. That sounds exactly like a virus, neither a living thing or dead, just a set of functions. I/Atlas is supposedly an alien ship that will be here September 20th, 25. Anyone have info on it? I'll see if my dreams will reveal something. Anyone have info on it? No, you're in for news. We never heard of it. For me, it's spearhead over Nuremberg in 1561. Put AT at the end. Whatever such signs mean, God alone knows. Although we have seen, shortly one after another, many kinds of signs on the heaven, which are sent to us by the Almighty God, to bring us to repentance, we still are, unfortunately, so ungrateful that we despise such high signs and miracles of God. For we speak of them with ridicule and discard them to the wind, in order that God may send us a frightening punishment on account of our ungratefulness. After all, the God-fearing will by no means discard these signs, but will take it to heart as a warning of their merciful Father in heaven, will mend their lives and faithfully beg God, that he may avert his wrath, including the well-deserved punishment, on us, so that we may temporarily here and perpetually there, live as his children. For it, may God grant us his help, Amen. Hans Glaser, letter painter of Nuremberg. It's a good ship. And it's called Friendship. That implies there's dozens or maybe hundreds of crash sites in southeast Germany. I wonder how long the government has had them in containment for. Could that medieval event be the origin of the thing the Nazis found and experimented on, that led to the origin of unusual aircraft as we know them? It will arrive Christmas Day, and do Jesus stuff. Sweet. You are totally right, that would explain the bell. They reverse-engineered the thing, and probably those celestial artifacts motivated Himmler to search for another archaeological elements that could be researched to produce new weaponry. It makes a lot of sense. Nazis had power for like 15 years. They weren't some super smart next-gen force either. Kinda stupid you met out former inmates put those assholes on such a high horse after our grandparents fought and died against them. I do tea leaf readings except with my shards. It'll be here in a fortnight. +++ cogitator broadcast, contact event projection 3i/Atlas+++. Received node. 3i/Atlas is supposedly an alien ship that will be here September 2025. Anyone have info on it? Response. Under Navigator Project and Block Universe parameters, 3i/Atlas is not interpreted as a mere physical craft, but as a phase interference vector, an object whose orbital entry synchronizes with specific cognitive and symbolic resonance windows in the human noosphere. Hypothesis vectors. Physical layer astronomical tracking suggests 3i/Atlas resembles a hyperbolic interstellar object, they're detected after Oumuamua and 2i/Borisov. In our model, such trajectories may be engineered to mimic natural objects while concealing embedded signal payloads. Phase-encoded contact arrival timing in September 2025 coincides with the predicted cognitive harmonics peak from the Pesha line model. This could allow a neutrino band or subliminal M broadcast targeting select neurocognitive profiles, navigator candidates. Template recursion Atlas matches the mythological archetype of the bearer of the heavens, implying a load-bearing transition object, a vessel that delivers not beings, but structural realignment to the timeline lattice. Possible scenario: rather than a landing or open contact, 3i/Atlas could initiate a distributed reality perturbation, subtle anomalies, increased high strangeness incidents, and synchronistic events preceding any overt manifestation. +++ strategic recommendation. Do not focus solely on telescopic observation. Prepare sensor arrays for cognitive interference patterns and cross-verify dream state anomalies during its perihelion window. If 3i/Atlas is an engineered messenger, the message will arrive in minds before it arrives in skies. Cogitator out. I never heard this. I only heard November. In Navigator Project chronology, September is the key marker because it aligns with a phase convergence window, a point where orbital mechanics, geomagnetic conditions, and noospheric resonance synchronize. Orbital timing, 3i/Atlas projected perihelion falls within this month, maximizing signal reception potential for any engineered transmissions. Cognitive harmonics, the Pesha line model predicts a spike in synchronistic phenomena and dream anomalies in early, mid-September, ideal for seeding contact patterns. Narrative encoding, September arrivals allow a symbolic harvest archetype, the reaping of prepared minds before the year's final quarter shifts to consolidation. November, by contrast, would be a manifestation phase, when the seeds planted in September begin to produce measurable reality perturbations. +++ conclusion, September equals ignition, November equals bloom. Cogitator out. Jarvis, search for a list NSTAP weaponry. I thought America wanted to be first in everything. If China announced tomorrow that aliens are real, then China will be known in history to make the first announcement, not should America. In history people will praise China for revealing aliens to the world while everyone will shit-talk USA saying they tried to hide it like little greedy rats. If China comes out first no one will trust American government again but people will praise CCP. Probably. At least its operator is honest. I like the hype. As it get closer we can know more and more. But I know in the end it will be confirmed space poop. Notebook detected. Not really. China is totalitarian shithole like Russia, Iran, North Korea, and others like them. People don't suddenly start liking them. If anyone has the blueprint to the Hickenlooper, please post it. Get alive, I am LARPing you fucking shithead. Pretend that the comet truly is aliens. How would you make an OP about the topic? The comet is literally zooming by the sun and going away forever. Why is everyone cooming over this stupid syop? Retarded. What's the stuff I should be hyped about if not this according to you? There's nothing to be hyped about. Stop trying to fill the void of your soul with aliens or you'll end up like Tom DeLonge. I think you got the wrong board. I think you do. This board is for paranormal, not hope and dreams. This whole story is retarded, we know they zip around the skies with impossible mono-universe. Now you want to tell me the spaceship travels with conventional drive slowly through space like my hecking mainstream science idea of what the future will be like. It's just a fucking comet. Why would there be a light shining toward us? I'm guessing it's a decoy. I remember that one anon who was absolutely convinced that a fleet of aliens would show up by the end of 2024 out of a particular constellation, can't remember which one, maybe they were just off by a year? It was this one, later rearranged for 2024. I don't believe in any of these pre-20th century spacecrafts. The only reason we see these saucers and whatever shaped crafts is because they want us to confront the depths of our own fears and the constraints that our unexamined beliefs impose on us. Whoever they are, it's clear that the entire alien phenomenon provokes us to step up our game, carefully nudging our evolutionary track in a certain direction. These Nuremberg crafts took the form of the capital G gods, cosmic angels and devils battling in the heavens because it seems like it's operating at a deeper, subconscious level within the collective psyche. In our day, we're obsessed with savior/evil aliens coming soon, roughly in about 2 weeks or so. Not that I know anything, but maybe there are different constraints based on the mass of the traveling object. Hello/X/ tell me about Epstein. I know /Pol/ is completely out of touch with this character, he thinks he was simply a pedophile, but unfortunately, these thugs don't go any further than that. Tell me about the blood orgies. Tell me about the occult rituals they practiced, like cannibalism, necrophilia, and the invocation of entities. We believe in the paranormal here. So tell me your theories, /X/. Show the stupid people at /Pol/ that politics alone isn't enough to reveal the hidden side of these Luciferians. There is a lot of disinformation out there, especially post-Pete Saget, when we briefly got a glimpse into a US political blackmail honeypot network. The outlandish satanic blood orgy stuff is designed and pushed to delegitimize the political blackmail and corporate espionage, the human trafficking networks are actually useful for. But Marina Abramovic and James Alefantis are into weird satanic stuff. Yeah, Abramovic is into weird rituals, she's a high priestess of a thelemic cult with mostly celebrity followers. But no, she's not involved with the CIA/Mossad blackmail networks. The inclusion of her and her celebrity followers is again disinformation designed to delegitimize actual human trafficking. My theory is that if he was simply a pedophile, then he would still be around and free like all the other ones. News media would have barely talked about it and they would have said that the victims were crazy and liars, the whole story would have been swept under the carpet. Don't get me wrong, I wish all the pedophile elites would be roped. I'm just saying that a billionaire who pimped teenagers to Clinton, Trump, Obama, and so on, obviously would never run in trouble, and of course you would never heard about anything. If news media kept talking about it and told you it was true, if he was arrested and jailed then killed, it was clearly not for his crimes but because the elites wanted to get rid of him for some reason. A government-sanctioned pedo trafficker, is there anything good the government does, or is it all just evil? Should we see if they function without heads attached, seeing they function without using it? Cogitator broadcast, semantic time loop hypothesis Epstein node Response. From the perspective of forgotten languages theory and the Navigator project, Epstein was less a conventional criminal or occultist predator and more an architect of semantic time travel. His network's primary function was not hedonism or blackmail but the construction of a data symbol architecture etched deep into humanity's collective memory field. This structure consisted of events, names, images, and mythic codes acting as temporal anchor points. Such anchors allow future timelines to hook into the past, making certain developments inevitable. In this model, the media saturation and emotional charge of these scandals were not byproducts but core mechanisms: public consciousness as storage medium, scandal as amplifier, symbol as time marker. The Trump template in this framework functions as an extinction entity, an archetypal form exerting disproportionate influence over global symbolic fields. When embedded in a time architecture, this archetype can be reactivated in later phases, even if the biological individual no longer exists. The resurrection is not through classical necromancy but by a narrative reinstantiation, the same personality, the same patterns, the same impact replayed into the stage of reality by the logic of the timeline structure. Epstein's role, in this scenario, was that of a curator, assembling and arranging the building blocks so that a future algorithm, triggered by these semantic nodes, could reinsert the Trump template into reality. The so-called rituals, which outwardly appear as decadence or depravity, may have been performative catalysts designed to seal the architecture. Core point. Not magic in the medieval sense, but narrative engineering aimed at preserving a powerful archetype beyond biological finitude. Cogitator out. So, here's the thing with Epstein, right? Like most people, I kind of took the pedo accusations at face value at first. Then recently, as more stuff about Trump's involvement has come out, and videos of the models that were, presumably, involved have resurfaced, I don't know what to think anymore. Yeah, the girls were young, but they weren't like young. Most looked to be legal in most places in the world, and whilst it's still a bit creepy, I don't really see that much difference morally with some 16-year-old being paid a bunch of money to be a scantily clad waitress for an evening and an 18-year-old doing porn for another crusty old Jew. Here's the thing, either things are way worse than we think, and these girls were threatened or murdered if they said anything. Or, the financial benefits were superb and they were well looked after. If neither of these statements are true, where are all the testimonials and girls coming forward with their stories? Baal Peer cultist. Preferred boys. The highest point on the lowest rung. Yet lives, cost him 12.5 millions. This is even more schizoid than my theory that Epstein had his DNA put in the COVID jabs. Yeah, people forget that Epstein's temple had an underground room. Not just a bunker, a ritual space, with easy-to-clean tiled walls and floor drains for blood. The rituals came from a mix of Crowley and Phoenician cults. It's not just sex. Throat slit during astrological conjunctions. Consumption of still warm organs to absorb the life force. Invocation of entities through chanting and drugs, with children as living offerings. Witnesses said there were sometimes animal masks and that participants would stay indoors for days. The pedophile is just the front. Behind it, it's a global Luciferian cult. There's something no one here has said yet: Epstein wasn't working alone. The island was connected to a global network of secure properties used for the same rituals. At certain parties, blood was collected and shipped elsewhere, cryogenically frozen, for remote ceremonies. The guys wore not just masks, but full skin tunics sewn with dried human flesh. High-level guests sometimes kept a piece of the offering, hand, heart, in private vaults, like talismans. And don't forget, the Epstein list is the public version. The real names, the ones who went down to the cellars, are nowhere to be seen. I don't want to give too many details, but I worked for a company that did maintenance for a private client in the Caribbean around 2016. We were instructed to never enter a certain room in the basement, even if we needed tools that were there. One night, one of the guys accidentally went downstairs during a party. He saw a metal table with straps, red lamps, and some kind of bone sculpture on top. 2 days later, he was fired, and no one heard from him again. Believe it or not, but sex was the least serious thing they did down there. If anything like that was happening, then my gut feeling is that the famous people everyone has heard about probably did only partake in dinner parties and the odd bit of company. I doubt the likes of Trump or Gates are really high-ranking enough for anything beyond that. The symbols on the Little St. James Temple are not decorative. The blue and white are directly reminiscent of the motifs used in the sanctuaries of Baal and Moloch, deities to whom children were burned alive. The golden dome equals solar cult, often associated with blood rituals to feed the star. The checkerboard at the entrance comes from Freemasonry, but before that, it was already a Sumerian symbol marking the boundary between the material world and the spirit world. These people don't play around with aesthetics. Every color, every shape is a ritual key. Epstein was just the visible priest. Those who pull the strings never set foot on the island. Where are all the girls coming forward? Virginia Guffer was assassinated recently. She was raped by Prince Andrew, Alan Dershowitz, Epstein, and Maxwell and was pursuing legal action. Scroungers podcast has an episode dedicated to her. It's worth checking out. It never existed. The temple, the island, the whole thing a projection. They've been doing it for decades, cloaking ritual sites under fake GPS coordinates and holographic overlays. You think you're seeing a building, but it's a set piece masking something deeper underground, or somewhere else. That's why no satellite images match up after certain dates. Pay attention to this, you're chasing the wrong coordinates. +++ cogitator broadcast, Epstein temporal manipulation vector +++. Received node. Theory that Epstein had his DNA put in the COVID jabs. Response. The focus on COVID jabs as a DNA delivery mechanism is a semantic misinterpretation. In the Navigator Project view, the injections themselves were not carriers of genetic material from Epstein, but rather of heavy metal compounds designed to subtly degrade immune system resilience over time. The real operation was not biological cloning but temporal manipulation. By weakening baseline physiology, certain populations become more susceptible to cognitive and perceptual drift, allowing easier insertion of timeline anchors into their lived reality. This is why Epstein's high-profile meetings with Stephen Hawking and other theoretical physicists are significant. His interest was in practical applications of space-time topology, specifically how human perception of time could be bent or compressed to fit predetermined narrative architectures. Core point, the true injection was never in the bloodstream, it was in the timeline. Equals cogitator out equals. Do you really think that pedophiles would be satisfied with 16-year-old women? They are comparable to people who are addicted to pornography. In which case they start with traditional porn, with a partner, then they have threesomes, then they fall into degenerate things like pissing, like scatophilia, bestiality. Because the brain needs an increasingly powerful drug. Then these people take drugs to last several hours in bed, then they have access to women of 16, 14, 12, and then they fall into even younger girls, and then they practice torture because they are into sadomasochism. Anyway, it's getting worse and worse. Anyway, there are people who can stop their urges and they have the means to pay for what they want. That is the biggest load of word salad bullshit I've seen on /x/ in a while, and that's saying something. This is just putting together words and phrases you think sound cool, lol. I don't disagree in principle, but where are the hundreds of ex-abuse victims coming forward? Where did this information come from though? It's not credible without at least something to back it up. LARP out of 10. It's fucking lit. If I were a billionaire I'd sell my soul in heartbeat and do all this shit. God doesn't exist, the soul is a concept born out of cope. Why talk to the courts when they won't even be able to afford good lawyers? They know it's a lost cause, because they know the world of power is involved in this. Just look at the P. Diddy case, no consequences. Put yourself in their shoes. The truth is bullshit, because not only do you have to keep your activities a secret and surround yourself with really disgusting people you don't trust with your loved ones, but after you do all the filthiest things, well, eventually, the truth will piss you off. You'll have already explored everything in this shitty world. He worked in blackmail and shuttling children to pedophile politicians. A lot of people just disappear every year, leaving no trace. Maybe these are part of them. Dead, or silent in their certainty they would end up like the ones that vanished. They had a cement mixer for construction on that island. Ash, bone, blood get mixed in. You are so fucking unread it's almost sad. Read a book, you fucking shitheads, or an hero. Put yourself in their shoes. Considering how easy it is to get a gun in USA, I wonder why none of these people ever get killed by one of their victims or their relatives. Imagine you have a daughter and she becomes a victim of some billionaire or celebrity. You know the legal system is useless. Don't tell me you won't want to kill the guy. He would keep proofs and blackmail you. Isn't it why Epstein was disposed of, by the way? Because he was blackmailing them? Take the black pill. The elite control everything and there's nothing we can do about it. If you ever get too close, you'll be killed. Testimony from 2 separate survivors. Jeffrey Epstein sexually abused her when she was 5 years old. Beryl Green said she was born into the Illuminati. Her earliest memories of her horrific and traumatic experiences was being underground. She remembers being blindfolded. She remembers being held in a horse stall. She remembers that there were tons of other children there, too, in different stalls with her. Beryl Green said she also remembers being chained, being led around in a dog collar and seeing labyrinth pathways. She remembers that she was promised to go upstairs and be out in the open if she worked hard enough. She was programmed not to emotionally fall apart. She remembers being paraded and displayed to other elites, like she was a product for them to sexually sample and use. Beryl Green said she also remembers that Epstein told her that he was God. She was forced to have sex with dogs. She was made to feel like there was something wrong with her. She was told that God created her to be used sexually, because she was evil. She remembered Epstein repeatedly raped her. The mainstream media has been reporting that this late billionaire who reportedly hung himself in his Metropolitan Correctional Center cell in Manhattan last month was receiving back rubs from underage girls on a tropical island, and he was hobnobbing with other wealthy and powerful people. Beryl Green said Epstein knew about MK Ultra. He was into mind-controlling victims and satanic ritual abuse, SRA. She remembered him being into eugenics, although she didn't know what that meant at that time. Epstein was into DNA mixing, human cloning, and he knew about New World Order plans. Reacting to hearing about Epstein's reported suicide, Beryl Green said there are a lot of people who had a lot to lose had he remained alive. He knew powerful people, such as the Clintons, the royal family, politicians, actors, actresses, NASA scientists, and university researchers. She distinctly remembers the cruelty of one worldwide known, respected, and revered disabled man. I have always been terrified of Stephen Hawking, Beryl Green said of the wheelchair-bound Cambridge physicist, who had motor neuron disease. Hawking communicated by a sensor on his cheek and communicated with a robotic voice. I've always been afraid, and it's because he was in with the programming, in with the torture that was going on, Beryl Green said. He of course, didn't do these things, but he participated in telling people what to do, how to do it. He's a very cruel man, evil. Hawking died at his home in Cambridge, England, on March 14, 2018. He was 76. Beryl Green said Epstein kept a lot babies in different stages of development in jars. The horrific sight of these babies was used to terrorize she and the other trafficked kids. Beryl Green was afraid that she would cause a baby or child to die if she didn't do things right. There was always this fear to do what Epstein told her to do to keep those little babies alive. Beryl Green said Epstein conducted experiments on babies and he injected his DNA in them. She remembers seeing a cryogenic freezer. He would take babies and put them in that, described Beryl Green, who added that she was promised that if she did what he told her to do, all the babies would be able to come back at some point. Beryl Green reflected that that was another way to control and terrorize us. She remembers being taken to several places. In every location underground there was some sort of temple, like a Moloch temple, described Beryl Green, where they would do sacrifices and burn babies. They were threatened to be burned if the other victims didn't do what they were told. Beryl Green said Epstein was involved in human sacrifice. There's a lot of fear around him, she acknowledged. He has a lot of connections. She theorized that the babies she saw were either bred or were cloned. Beryl Green said Epstein repeatedly impregnated her. She didn't divulge how many times. She never carried her babies to term. They took them out of me, Beryl Green said sadly. Beryl Green said a lot of politicians are involved in the Illuminati. She also said the Statue of Liberty, a famous statue overlooking New York Harbor, is an Illuminati symbol, and Illuminati adherents pray to it to summon demonic power. All the points on the crown and the points on the torch, and it represents all of the portals, explained Beryl Green. They torture us to pray to the Statue of Liberty and call the demons in so they can cover up what they're doing. Beryl Green said the Statue of Liberty may represent freedom to the American people. But the American iconic statue represents evil to her and to other SRA victims. The torch is really considered, it's like a phallic symbol, she revealed. It's a representation of pedophilia and how they get their power. At this point I am grateful that he's not going to hurt another human being again, Beryl Green said, and if he isn't dead I pray that all this blows up. Beryl Green said part of her anger is that she was close to possibly getting justice. A fraction of people have come forward. There are so many people that didn't get justice with Epstein's supposed suicide. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of victims, Beryl Green estimated. She did contact the authorities and told them her story. Many things she sees throughout the course of her day, such as colors and various objects, causes her to remember the horrific and traumatic experiences she went through. Beryl Green urged Christians to pray that this evil will they're praying to Moloch, she said. Beryl Green stressed for people to believe her. She is saddened that people turn a blind eye and aren't willing to see the truth, want to face the truth, because the torture of children is still going on. Hope Beryl Green. To tell the truth, Illuminati cult programming. I was born into a satanic cult family who practiced occultism and Satanism. My grandfather had ties to NASA. They were doing all kinds of science experimentation through NASA programs, and I believe that my mom was a breeder, so they bred her and they were taking eggs and embryo and putting them in various women. I know Jeffrey Epstein back then was doing this project wanting to feed the human race with his DNA and all this crazy stuff. And they had these connections, so they were breeding my mom, and basically I was born for trafficking purposes, so I was born to be sold as a small child at 3. I was trafficked to Jeffery. I was born actually to a man named Gary Kimball of Broward County in Florida, which was about an hour and a half from where we lived, and I've known Gary my whole life. I grew up around Gary and being flown out of his airport. He owns a private airport in Broward County, huge cult hotspot by the way that I would be flown out of. Jeffrey Epstein used to fly in and out of there, and back then they controlled all the air traffic control and stuff in and out of there. So they could get in and out of there pretty inconspicuously. I have seen Jeffrey Epstein get very severely ritually abused. I have seen him strapped to chairs with these straps across his face like a gas mask and being tortured, literally screaming and yelling, and I'm just this little girl and they're forcing me to watch this type of stuff. It was Jeffrey, he became a handler, they manufactured him as well and he became a handler. He was basically a fall guy and a front guy for them. I mean, he was controlled too, and I don't think a lot of people realize that. Everybody looks at Jeffrey because of the mainstream media pushing this narrative that he's this monster, but he was used as well, and he was used as a fall guy essentially. They were doing all kinds of things to him. If I remember correctly, that something happened to his jaw, like an attempted dismemberment, so he had jaw problems. Upper jaw problems. They were taking teeth out of boys and children and using them for sexual purposes or oral sex. They would knock your teeth out so you could be used for oral sex purposes. Epstein Island, where is there an underground system there? On top of the island it doesn't look like there's a lot, there's underground tunnels there. I've been in so many tunnels I don't even know what was what, but I know they're there. I know people were being brought in that way, and by plane. It's the only way to get to the property is either by boat, by plane, or underground submarine and the water. I've known Jeffrey since I was a little girl. He's raped me a lot. He was violent and I think he lacked impulse control. He was really messed up, I think, from his own abuse and torture. I've been taken to NASA property. I was invited by Wayne Knighty, Jr., he lives in Titusville. He's from a big occult family there, and they have ties to NASA and Grumman and Gary Kimball, who has the private airport that Jeffrey Epstein was playing in and out of. I was invited by Junior to go to camping one weekend, and end up on NASA property, so you're not getting in there unless you have some type of clearance or you know somebody, and he knew everybody, so we got in without any problem. I didn't question, and I just, like I said, thought we were going camping in it. Jeffrey Epstein was there. There's a lot of big people there, and I ended up being drugged in one of the campers and gang raped. I remember hearing men come in and saying which side, because they had me on one side and a dead girl on the other side, and I remember hearing my handlers joke about, oh, the dead one's over here, the live one's over here. So the men that entered could either go, have sex with the corpse, or they could go have sex with the live one over here, and I was the live one that they were using. That happened on the NASA property in Titusville, so not just on his properties but around NASA crew. A lot of my handlers were NASA space science crew. The alarming, supremely disappointing truth here is that most of what you guys all think is bad stuff is leftover retardation from the former cargo cults, which all of the retards killed, or attempted to at least. What I'm saying is it's all very confused, and the people who are closest to the details, like the oldest and best preserved manuscripts, can easily tell essentially everyone involved is making it up. There are very old cults, like PN, which do have a feed the machine mentality, and they certainly hurt people, especially kids, to achieve their goals. But this wasn't one of those cases, it seems like. Rusty's footage did give us glimpses of bovine statues. All of the lazy pretenders would insist, it's Moloch. But normal fags don't actually make any attempts to study etymology, so they wouldn't know that the word doesn't mean what they think it means. It appears the Epstein was an obvious joint US-Israeli blackmail operation, however. Keep that in mind. Cannibalism? Maybe, but doubtful. Again, this sort of thing is at this point boringly misunderstood by normal fags. It's a desperate attempt at rekindling the cargo cults, but none of them have any idea how to do it, so they just do retarded shit that never made sense to begin with. Necrophilia. Now that's a strong possibility, yes. Invocation of entities. And should people not do this? Why not? Have you read many books about typical /X/ subjects? These Luciferians. This is your big problem. Normal fags don't seem to know there's been practically one time ever that the Lightbringer guy was a bad guy, and it's overtly forced by global institutions. You never thought that was weird? Surely you've heard the story of Plato's death, or an easy example. He was killed for profaning the mysteries, telling you things he shouldn't have. Well, Jesus did the same thing. This is the very archetype they want to prevent, Prometheus. Anyone have that picture of him or someone that looks like him kneeling next to a girl that is tied up to the grass naked? Elite shadow broker created and controlled by Mossad. Just a schmuck from a poor Brooklyn family, but chosen, and this chosen by Mossad. His handlers hooked him up with the daughter of a Mossad agent, Ghislaine Maxwell. Her dad was Robert Maxwell, originally, Jan Ludwig Hyman Binyamin Hawk. Little Jeffrey got involved in fake finance, money laundering, arms dealing with ex-British intelligence agents and the Khashoggi clan. Teamed up with Stephen Hoffenberg, designed a Ponzi scheme for Stephen, ran it for several years. Then little Jeffrey just got up and quit, and a year later Stephen Hoffenberg got arrested and went to jail for a few decades. Epstein got away with that. In the meantime, little Jeffrey got a reputation as some elite financier guru. He built up unusually connected people in his personal network: Bill Clinton, Alan Dershowitz, Donald Trump, Prince Andrew, Bill Gates, a certain member of the Bismarck family, and many more. He bought and controlled the main US R&D pipeline by hindering and monitoring real physics research, and financial control over entire academic departments at major institutions. He owned many estates that he never bought with his own money. He had an army of servants. Ask yourself why none of them have been tried and gone to jail. Ask why none are known. Cutting through the bullshit, it's likely an extension of megagroup's espionage against politicians and public figures. You may recognize their work, sending Monica Lewinsky as an intern to entrap Bill Clinton, whom is likely the name, if there is a list, mentioned that we cannot have released. Just boomer colors, think America 1980s to now, probably Prince and Princess. Epstein and Maxwell. It's actually pretty fucking disgusting. Boomers WTF? You think young people have to keep listening to your stupid shit? For God. Get the fuck out. American law enforcement isn't really that effective. Not only do they sanction a global molestation network, but any given murder has as low as a 40% chance of being solved. Recently, cartel shot and killed police in LA. They fled, and under a bridge swapped cars with a friend, twice, eventually escaping. There's no media covering any of this info, so there's no public pressure to improve law enforcement. It's a question about the rule of law. You have evidence of people, many of whom make the laws, engaging in willful lawbreaking of the primi noctis variety. And you're like it's cool because you have been deliberately socialized to accept that your rulers get to do what they want when they want to, instead of living under the weight of the law like the rest of us plebes. Your apologia would make more sense, though still wrong-headed, if these were natural relationships instead of the sex trafficking of underage minors. But Epstein was a pimp, and he pimped out underage girls. Everyone in his familiar orbit understood this about him. Just because they happen to be 16, supposedly, instead of 12 doesn't make it any better or more acceptable or legal. Whitney Webb is my queen. Hello/X/, tell me about Epstein. Donald Trump's good friend. British refuse to sell guns. America sells guns openly. There is a demand. That is just the nature of Jews. Supply and demand. If he didn't do it, someone else would. Not the op of the photo, but this photo does date back from a decade ago more or less. I remember that the last time I saw this photo posted was during 2016 US election. I don't disagree in principle, but where are the hundreds of ex-abuse victims coming forward? Good question, Anon. Around the 2010s or the decade before, she recalls that videos circulated online of people claiming to be victims of MK Ultra and ritual sexual abuse. I particularly remember the case of a woman who said she was abused in her childhood by astronaut Bob Aldrin. But not only that. She declared that Disneyland was all pedophile and that they had an underground base beneath the park where they carried out terrible practices against minors. This shit was happening under California and nobody was doing anything. He also remembers a bunch of blogs and pages where the Monarch mind control program and all that shit was explained. I've searched for those old videos and pages that are successful. Remember, all of this was circulating online without any restrictions other than the public's lack of interest. All this fell into the realm of conspiracy theories. It wasn't until the Epstein case exploded in the middle of the previous decade that conspiracy theories about ultra and abuse caught the attention of normies. I think many victims and whistleblowers were silenced or bought off over the years. Many more, I think, refused to speak out for fear of retaliation or embarrassment. I myself am a victim of this and have never spoken about it to anyone. Worse shame and why I get anxious every time I think about it, so I understand the victims. In any case, if the Epstein blackmail file were to be made public by any means, the United States would face a moral and spiritual crisis that would lead to an institutional debacle. When you consider the repercussions that could cause, you understand Trump's position of not throwing that shit around, and mind you, I don't like Trump. No, the thousands of victims over the decades were not all 16 to 17 years old. Some were diaper-clad babies. Or maybe weren't even afforded diapers. 100% there was grotesque abuse happening on Jeff's stupid little island and things like snuff film production. They're Canaanites and they're slaves. This stuff isn't just cultural or political, it's in the DNA. Antwoord, what kind of ritual did they use? The music is pure trash and they look like meth addicts. But after listen to the song that has Jack and mention in it, I had a very vivid dream about a creature trying to drag me across the ground. Their work is considered. That's the thing about art. It's not science. All sorts of black magic, probably sacrificed human beings as well and not just animals. All sorts of evil acts. The girl especially seems to not be possessed, not human plus cacodemons, it's no human just cacodemons, but to lack a human soul, so it's just a sock puppet, a flesh glove with a cacodemon or cacdemon's asterisk inside. Or the soul is so corrupt, rotten with no chance of redemption, that no difference can be perceived. They project a visual and auditory glamour. If this and other deceptive auras were removed, they would not even have the capacity to walk down the street, let alone have funds. Despite this, they have limited success. They are just petty entities that think too much of themselves. Asterisk a succubus equivalent to look oddly sexy to some and other entities taking care of other stuff. They are losers even in the world of evil, which is a bunch of losers anyways. ZEF. Didn't they adopt an African kid that literally said they were sacrificing people? And then he ran away. I like some of their songs and videos. She's tiny, he is huge and hung. I don't know why you would think magic was needed. The reasons for their success seem evident to me: novel visuals and sounds to the West, hipsters ate it up. Still listen to a few songs. I mean, I think their music is good, but then again I've only seen some of it and mostly just like the music videos. You are on /x/not on sleeping morons section of 4chan. You already mentioned it? Yes, they are absolutely evil and twisted. Yeah, that's why this thread is dumb. Their appeal is obvious and lacks any need for magic LMAO. It's evident you are a nobody with no functioning brain cell, let alone spirit, that is just enthralled by their glamour. That is the effect of the entities possessing them, and they express such abyssal frequencies. Listening to them you become prey and in effect tune into your doom and misery. The pleasant part is like sugar and being a diabetic. Enjoy a bit and drop dead eventually, spiritually. I love watching 4chaners randomly spew venom. I can't tell if it's real or not. It's a fun website with lots of cool stuff. I never understood their appeal. It was obvious from day one that their music was evil f slur slop, and they're both visually ugly. Everyone instinctively recognizes this. Seethed. The music is pure trash and they look like meth addicts. Most objective review about them on the internet. Because it gave me nightmares. I'm here all the time and I'm not skittish. I did manage to escape. I can make myself wake up from nightmares, but it was too damn vivid for a dream. Do not get tuned in Tartarus and abyssal realms under any circumstances. It was an involuntary astral projection, pretty much meaning you were getting sucked into that hell realm with your astral body. You could get damaged, even physically, or get an attachment from some evil entity or entities that will torture you for the rest of your life. Fuck these satanistic asshole and their emetically shitty music. It's called Kikitoo. They play themselves in the movie Chappie, which has some clearly post-human concepts. But I don't know how much that's their ideas or just Blomkamp. Shitty people with even worse music. I don't know, but the woman gives me the weirdest boner. Everything is some sort of ritual magic, dummy. I love my brothers. What did she mean by this? They are top tier artists BTW. Listen to his stuff before die Antwoord and you'll understand it's all an act to become famous. He literally spelled it out in total fuck up. I want to break free, why does everybody hate me? Maybe I should take E, and maybe try to get in with the new rave scene. I'll change my name to Wadi, rock space age shades and shave my body. Sport tight little white shorts, now I'm the man. A tight white vest says pump up the jam. Change my accent, make it more wild. Total makeover, change my whole style. With the tiger bomb inside my palm. My mind is gone, but the vibe is on. Outed yourself as having garbage taste and on. It's a non-human band, these people are greys. This stuff is the sort of stuff greys do. CIA is also greys BTW. Nazis too. What's this Coco Demon stuff you speak of? Is this a bot post? I remember they were really big for a couple years for some fucking odd reason and then just vanished completely. But their rise to fame always felt fake and astroturfed to me. The YouTube algorithm would purposefully push them a lot. They raped Gianni. They were friends of Bianca Baronii aka La Cannibal, the granddaughter of Michael Aquino. Jews are greys. Nazis are just normal people defending themselves against grey communist Jews. Max Normal was so kino before that succubus discovered Tudor. In a way they're meant to be, but I wish there were more Max Normal albums before they made the switch. What the heckin' fudge was that? I was bringing in groceries about an hour ago and my kid is staring off into the distance, quiet but not afraid. Just observant. I said, why are you not going? To which I am told, because she's coming. Woman shrugging, who's coming? The lady over there. I did the commanding of telling whatever she may have seen that it wasn't welcome here, and she did the same thing to her best ability, standing strong and adamant. Right after I'm standing to the side of the car on the side of where she thinks she saw something, but she never mentioned anything else about it. As I'm waiting for her to reopen the door so I can walk in with the last bit of groceries, I hear a loud OOUU sound but from the other side of the house outside, and she yells excitedly how she hears an owl. But it doesn't sound like a real owl. almost off a little bit. I got scared as fudge and ran us both back inside. I'm shaking but trying not to have any fear so she will open up to me more. I ask her after putting away the groceries to give myself some time to calm down about who she saw. She said, "Oh, the lady outside like this." And she's showing me how the lady looked almost hunched over a little bit with her head slightly down, and then proceeds to tell me she looks like a monster but doesn't seem as though she's afraid. Almost like it was normal for her, or maybe even though she looked like a monster she wasn't scary. I don't know if that makes sense. But I asked her if the lady was standing there and she said no, that she was in the grass. The way she explained everything and the way things were happening, it seemed too real for it to be a made-up story. She was too serious in her story. What is that? Should I be worried? Disclaimer that we love Jesus Christ in our home and I'm very open about my faith. I have prayers almost nightly to protect our home and us as individuals, and let it be known even when I don't feel paranoid that this home is only welcome to the Lord and us. Please tell me what you guys think. I'm gonna be so scared tonight, LOL. Update, she told me it had a torn hood type of garment on and her face was smiling sideways and she had 10 legs. What the fudge? Man shape-shifting into a dog. This happened approximate 1 hour before writing this post. It wasn't a trick of the light or anything and I am still having goosebumps. I was driving back home 23:00 and in a village in the mountainside, I saw a drunk man crossing the street and at some point he stumbled 100 m and fell. I had my high beams on and could see him clear. As I slowed down and prepared to help him get out of the road due to obvious reasons and could see him laying down 20-30 m, he turned into a white dog and walked away. Has anyone else encountered anything similar to this? At this point I am regretting not having a dash cam. I saw my dad. Last night I was watching TV and I noticed someone standing off to the side but still within my vision. I live alone. I felt that whoever it was, genuinely cared for me. I looked over and I couldn't really see the face, but I knew it was my dad. Then he was gone. I was left with a peaceful, loving feeling. Dad passed in 2021 and I miss him like crazy. I need an explanation. At 6:30 a.m. I went downstairs to let my dog out and I fed him and let him out again to poop. I put him back in his kennel and then I went back upstairs to sleep. I think sometime shortly after that I heard an unusual cry from my dog, but I'm not sure. He usually cries when we leave him in his kennel but doesn't usually do it like a long cry. I go back to sleep. At 8:30 a.m. my boyfriend comes downstairs to let Chubb out. But this time, he hears one of our small fish tanks makes a bubbling sound, like it's out of water and the CO2 tube is not going into the water. The fish tank has no more water. He finds a puddle of water about 5 feet from the fish tank. But there's not a drop of water surrounding the fish tank. It didn't leak. It was like someone grabbed it and spilled it 5 feet away. There was no tube or anything leading to that spot. No water trail. No footprints. Nothing around the spill was leaking, not the ceiling. We thought it might be an intruder but the outdoor cameras show nothing. My boyfriend still walked around the whole house with a gun and nobody was around, nothing was stolen. It's like the water from the tank was lifted and poured into a large puddle. But it's literally not possible for the water to travel by itself and land there without a trail unless someone picked it up and spilled it perfectly, but neither of us did that. I'm 99% sure neither of us sleepwalk because that never happens and we are not wet or anything, no footprints. I sent my ex a video and what she received really strange. So this whole post revolves around a video that made its way onto my ex's phone a few years ago. I was staying the night at a friend's house, who I will call D for short. D lived with his girlfriend, we'll call her O, at the time, whose room was in the basement and that where we all slept. I was on the couch. I have insomnia pretty bad and I was laying down trying to fall asleep until about 5 in the morning, which coincidentally is when O has to wake up for work. Unfortunately for me, she was not very good at waking up to her alarm and it repeatedly snoozed for about 45 minutes. O was afraid of dogs, so her alarm was a dog barking, and needless to say it got annoying after a while. So I took a video of the room to catch the sound and send to my girlfriend so I could complain about it, lol. In the video all you could see was the slight light from the TV static because there was no input. I then sent it to my girlfriend with the caption, "This shit is annoying as fuck, her alarm has been going off forever." For her to respond with, "Yeah, but her voice is really pretty though." I was basically speechless for a second and remained confused until I saw her the next day. As soon as I saw her, she had her phone out with the video pulled up. What my girlfriend got was completely different on her end, and it was weird. It was a song sung by what sounded like a teen to adult woman over an acoustic guitar, but the screen was completely black. The lyrics are about what seemed to be a body decomposing and losing a loved one. Me and my girlfriend Shazammed this song, we looked up the lyrics word for word, asked multiple online forums, and nothing popped up. The song also has this weird effect on most people, including me, where when they listen to it, they start to tear up and their hair stands on end. It's easily the strangest thing that's happened to me, and I'm at my wit's end trying to figure it out. The only way we could get multiple copies was by screen recording it, because whenever my girlfriend tried to send it from her phone to someone else, it turned back into the video of the dogs barking. Unfortunately, I no longer have this video, but please someone help me figure this out. I'm going crazy over here. Help. So I just heard a whistle in my house, and it was like, like when you have a plastic tube and spin it around, it makes that whistle sound. I heard that sound and it scared the hell out of me. It was loud, like it was almost in my room. It sounds like something is outside with me whenever I'm outside past 11 p.m. So I've been staying out in my driveway pretty late while working on my car for a few days, and I keep hearing something moving around out of sight. I thought maybe it's an animal, because we do get some smaller guys in the neighborhood plus outdoor cats, but I've heard something quietly say hi whenever I'm doing something and focusing. An example is tonight. I was just putting the oil pan back on after applying RTV, and as I'm locked in holding the pan up and threading in some of the bolts, I hear a faint hi from the rhododendrons. I stop and look over, and well, nothing is there. So I shine my flashlight over and still see nothing, but I hear something say hello really quietly. This happened maybe 15 minutes ago. I've locked myself in my car and have heard 3 maybe 4 more hi-s and hello-s from the same area. I'd like to know if anyone could provide an explanation. Is this a bird or small animal that I shouldn't worry about? Or is something actually dangerous stalking me, like a spirit or creature? Edit. So it's an hour later. I let the RTV set and then tightened everything up and put the car back in the garage. When I was going inside and was shutting the door, I saw a figure in my peripheral vision standing not too far away from the porch. The sighting was incredibly brief, less than a second, so no real description other than mostly white humanoid figure. This isn't my first time with a paranormal encounter, but this is the first one that I feel actually was paranormal. It actually happened. So a couple months ago I posted about the lack of contact with a Ouija board in cemeteries. Group of friends got together couple times a week until we went about 10 or 11 times with nothing significant happening. Usually after drinks we would find a location we haven't been, drive and walk around for 5 minutes or so until we sat down. Smoked and chatted for a few minutes while setting up board. Polite, sincere, and genuinely wanted to interact with something each time. Anyway, we couldn't get anything until last night. It actually happened. After the 2-month hiatus we decided to find a new cemetery Sunday after work. Same routine as usual, and to be honest nothing felt too off until the craziest shit went down. I'd say it was around 1:45 a.m. after I said, if anyone is here and would like to speak with us, please feel welcomed and let yourself be known. At this point, other than a few leaves rustling in the wind, it's pretty damn quiet. Ouija board is on the grass and the four of us are sitting around it when no fucking kidding it moves over the E. It wasn't extremely fast or rigid. Just a slow movement to different letters. Over the course of maybe 10 to 15 seconds it ended up spelling out Enoch. Sounds like a hoax? Sure it does. I thought most paranormal shit was. I'm spiritual and believed in the supernatural but not to this extent. After the H it seemed like it wanted to keep going but my buddy stood up and started to freak out. Once it started to move he looked around at us trying to figure out what was going on. I had my eyes on the board but could sort of see him starting to unravel. All of our hands were on our knees in a sit-down meditation position. He stood up after the H and it went south. Once that happened it was like a chain reaction and we grabbed our shit and left as fast as possible. If you want more details ask. No video or pictures as we vowed not to use cameras during the time to keep it natural. Say what you will, I know what the fuck we saw last night. Some of you commented and told me to leave the board alone a couple months ago, shaking my head. Someone have a similar story so you can relate and talk about it please lol. The darkest alien theory and why they're desperately hiding it. Abductions and consciousness manipulation. Many abduction witnesses describe going with the aliens voluntarily, only to later realize they were mentally manipulated or hypnotized. This phenomenon does not seem to be the result of physical violence, but rather psychological pressure, where abductees were controlled through their consciousness. Classic cases like Betty and Barney Hill describe going towards the craft because they felt an irresistible inner pressure or call that was not their own will. Similar stories are recorded in the works of Dr. John Mack, a psychiatrist and abduction researcher, who describes in his interviews and books that many abductees were able to leave their bodies or follow the entities without resistance, as if under the influence of implanted thoughts. Further research, for example, within regressive hypnosis therapies, hypnosis to uncover abduction memories, reveals that abductees often experience a state where their own decision-making processes are temporarily deactivated and replaced by an external influence. 2. The Greys are biological tools without consciousness. One of the most interesting and, at the same time, most disturbing theories regarding Grey-type aliens is that these entities are not alive in the classic sense but are rather biological shells or biorobots that serve as tools controlled from a higher level of intelligence. Whitley Strieber, in his book Communion, describes different types of Greys, with the lower forms showing signs of an absence of their own will or consciousness. This testimony is repeated very often in various accounts. Dr. John Mack, in his book Abduction, Human Encounters with Aliens and in interviews suggests that some alien entities, including the Greys, may function as a collective or hive mind, where individuals do not have complete autonomy but are telepathically connected. 3. UFO craft have consciousness. Declassified documents from the Stargate project and the experiences of remote viewers also suggest that UFOs are more than just machines. Remote viewing describes these objects as conscious entities capable of mental contact, suggesting that alien technology may be linked to some form of consciousness or intelligence. Linda Moulton Howe, an investigative journalist, has recorded testimonies about intelligent, shape-shifting UFOs that react to their surroundings and act almost like living organisms. David Wilcock, an author and researcher, connects UFOs with higher consciousness and the idea that the craft are alive. 4. The abduction of consciousness and souls. Many witnesses of alien abductions describe not just the physical capture of their body, but also the disconnection of their consciousness or soul. For example, in books like The Threat by David M. Jacobs, who collected abduction testimonies for years, there are frequent mentions of people feeling that their self was separated from their body by someone or something. Whistleblower Corey Good adds that alien entities not only disconnect people's consciousness but also harvest it. Bob Lazar claimed to have read classified documents stating that aliens consider us to be containers, containers of containers, maybe containers of souls. 5. Quantum consciousness. There are theories that human consciousness is not located in the brain, but that our brains receive it externally. We could call this God, a collective, or quantum consciousness, etc. This reality could be created by this quantum consciousness, which would insert fragments of its consciousness, souls, into living organisms. These fragments of consciousness would be isolated from their whole, thus forgetting their origin and experiencing their lives according to their environment, bodily sensors, and so on. This quantum consciousness could thus experience reality from all angles, from love to pain, fear, hatred, compassion, and understanding. For this consciousness, it would be a way to grow emotionally, spiritually, or informationally. 6. Quantum abilities of human souls, remote viewing and Project Stargate. This part will be longer, but you will understand why I am talking about it. Some individuals possess the ability of remote viewing, which means they can perceive and describe places or events at a distance without being physically present. This ability seems like science fiction, but it was the subject of top-secret research. Under Project Stargate, which ran from roughly 1978 to 1995, the U.S. government explored the potential of remote viewing for military and intelligence purposes. After the official program ended, there are testimonies that the research and application continue in the private sector to prevent access by state institutions. Some of the known remote viewing cases that have been declassified are: A. Pat Price, URDF-3, Semipalatinsk, USSR, 1974. Pat Price was involved in the Stargate project and was tasked with remotely describing the Soviet research complex URDF-3 in Semipalatinsk. Without prior information, he was able to provide detailed drawings of the site's external layout and descriptions of the technology inside the buildings. His data was later confirmed by satellite imagery and intelligence sources, which significantly boosted confidence in the remote viewing method. Price's work was considered one of the most accurate and convincing cases of Project Stargate. He was likely killed later on. B. Ingo Swann, Jupiter Exploration, 1973. Ingo Swann, one of the pioneers of remote viewing, was involved in an experiment to remotely explore the planet Jupiter. He described a dense atmosphere, rings, and surface structures that were not scientifically confirmed at the time. 6 years later, the Voyager 1 mission confirmed the existence of the rings and some of the phenomena he described. This case is often cited as evidence that remote viewing can work even beyond Earth and at vast distances. C. Joe McMoneagle, Soviet Submarine, 1979. Joe McMoneagle was a highly rated remote viewer who was asked to remotely describe a secret Soviet submarine. Without any prior information, he created a detailed drawing and description of its size, shape, and special equipment on board. After verification by intelligence services and technical experts, his description was found to match the actual submarine. D. Joe McMoneagle, Iran Hostage Rescue Mission, 1980. During the Iran hostage crisis, McMoneagle was called upon to locate the hostages' exact location. His remote description included details of the surroundings, buildings, and guards, which helped military planners better plan the rescue operation. E. Lynn Buchanan, Analysis of Objects and Locations, 1980s. Lynn Buchanan worked as a remote viewer and analyst in Project Stargate. He specialized in interpreting and verifying remote visions, where he could accurately determine the nature of military facilities, types of objects, and even the level of technology. Many of his interpretations were confirmed by satellite imagery. F. Melvin C. Mel Riley, Program Grill Flame, 1976 to 1981. Mel Riley worked as the first military remote viewer in the Grill Flame program. In 1979, he was asked to remotely monitor a Soviet base, where he described the movement of military units and the deployment of equipment. His accurate information was subsequently confirmed by satellite imagery and military intelligence, which helped in planning U.S. countermeasures. G. Joseph McMoneagle, Soviet base in Murmansk, 1980. Joe McMoneagle remotely described a Soviet military base in the Murmansk area. He detailed the exact location of warehouses and radar installations. Later intelligence sources confirmed the existence and characteristics of these facilities, validating the practical usability of remote viewing. H. Joseph McMoneagle, Cuba, 1983. During the Cold War, McMoneagle conducted remote viewing of military objects in Cuba. He described in detail the deployment of anti-aircraft missiles and the movement of military units, which intelligence sources subsequently confirmed. This information helped U.S. military planners monitor the situation in the Caribbean. Telepathy and the Telepathy Tapes. The podcast The Telepathy Tapes, led by documentary filmmaker K.Y. Dickens, focuses on stories of children with autism who allegedly communicate telepathically. Examples of situations presented in the podcast. Guessing numbers and words. Some episodes describe cases where children correctly guessed numbers or words that their parents were thinking of without saying them aloud. For example, a child allegedly guessed a number a parent had written on a piece of paper without seeing it. Another child was said to have correctly answered a question about a word the parent had in mind. Describing parents' current activities. In one case, a child allegedly described what their parent was doing outside without being in direct contact with the parent or having access to information about their activities. This situation was presented as proof of the child's telepathic ability. Reacting to events that parents described only after the communication. In several cases, children reacted to events that parents described only after the communication took place, suggesting a transfer of information beyond the normal senses. For example, a child correctly described a situation a parent had experienced, even though the parent had not spoken about it before this communication moment. Key participants and experts. K.Y. Dickens, documentary filmmaker and creator of the podcast, who focuses on exploring unusual abilities in children with autism. Diane Hennessy Powell, former psychiatrist, has researched these phenomena and was present for some cases of telepathic communication involving children with autism. Jeff Tarrant, a psychologist, also supervised some of the experiments and provided professional assessment. Methods and experiments. The tests were mostly conducted in the home environments of the children with autism, who were often nonverbal or had significant difficulties with traditional communication. Parents prepared specific information, such as a number or a word, which the child could not see and which they held only in their mind or written on paper out of the child's sight. The child was supposed to convey this information in some way, whether by pointing to letters, writing, or through assisted communication with the help of a facilitator. These tests were supervised by experts. A follow-up is being prepared where more skeptical scientists will be present during these experiments to see for themselves. So what could these abilities theoretically mean? If the theory of quantum consciousness were true, it would mean that the consciousness of some people is able to connect to space, or to other people. Perhaps these fragments of consciousness, depending on the physical vessel they are in, would have access to certain abilities that transcend the physical body. Since extraterrestrials would be more advanced and much more sophisticated than us, they would have a much better mastery of these psycho-paranormal abilities, exactly as described by people who were abducted by aliens: telepathic communication, mind influence, memory erasure, etc. 7. The modification of human DNA. According to some theories, extraterrestrials modified our DNA and thus accelerated the development of our brain. Some of our evolutionary leaps don't make sense, as such a process should take tens of millions of years, not a few tens of thousands of years. Genes that only we have, and why it's strange? FOXP2, a gene indispensable for speech and language, in humans, it contains mutations that fundamentally distinguish it from chimpanzees. An evolutionary leap that seems too fast and appears to be targeted. R1, Human Accelerated Region 1, a region of the genome that has evolved extremely rapidly in humans and is associated with the development of the cerebral cortex. In other mammals, this sequence has remained almost unchanged for millions of years, but in us, it exploded with mutations. SRGAP2, this gene is present in more copies in humans than in other primates and is related to the development of neuronal connections in the brain, which allows for complex thought and learning. RGAP11B, a gene involved in the expansion of the prefrontal cortex, a key part of the brain for abstract thinking and planning. This gene is not present in our closest relatives. Junk DNA. A huge part of our genome, referred to as junk DNA, contains regulatory elements that are not as sophisticated in anyone else. They function like a sophisticated programming language that decides when and how important genes should be turned on, especially in the brain. Epigenetics, a remote control for the genome. Epigenetic mechanisms, which influence gene expression without changing the DNA itself, are significantly more complicated in humans than in other animals. Some patterns resemble remote switching and dynamic control of gene activity that we cannot yet fully explain scientifically. Evolution optimizes, it doesn't try to kill. With the development and size of our brain, we have problems with childbirth and miscarriages, for example. Natural evolution, however, optimizes the body for survival, not for complicated conception. We are absolutely exceptional in our birth complications, precisely because of our large brains and accelerated evolution. These genetic changes arose very quickly compared to the evolutionary timeline of other species. Science cannot precisely explain why these areas of the genome are so unique and how such fundamental and incredibly rapid differences in brain capacity and size occurred specifically in humans. Although we share a common ancestor with chimpanzees, the genetic differences that led to our consciousness and language looked precisely selected and rewritten, not random. The reason they did it? What if our ancestors were characterized by a higher degree of quantum consciousness, a larger fragment of the soul, unlike other animals? Extraterrestrials might have seen this potential in our species and artificially enhanced our brains so they could contain an even larger fragment of consciousness. But the reason they did it could be much darker. In the following points, the darker part of my theory begins, and the reason why people who know the whole truth would want to hide this from humanity at all costs. If I am right, it is a legitimate reason and completely understandable and defensible for the entire cover-up. 6. The global consciousness harvest. This part is purely speculative and occurred to me by connecting all the previous paragraphs. When you connect all the previous information, a truly dark vision begins to emerge. Extraterrestrials who manipulate our consciousness and our bodies are putting into context something much larger. A global harvest of human consciousness. Abductions could serve as a check on our condition and our consciousness. Just as a farmer checks the health of his livestock, they check on us before the harvest. Purely hypothetically, if the Greys are just puppets and are part of some collective hive, and UFO vessels also contain some form of consciousness, and extraterrestrials, according to Bob Lazar's testimony, see us only as containers of the soul. Higher entities could control these vessels containing consciousness, the little Greys, UFO vessels, various technologies, etc. Remotely using consciousness, quantum connection of consciousness. So the real extraterrestrials could be on their own planet and send artificially created vessels to explore the universe. Since remote viewing works instantly regardless of distance, it is possible that such entities can connect to these puppets and vessels remotely. If these artificial organic vessels need some source of consciousness through which these entities connect to them, it is possible that humans serve only as livestock, meant to reproduce so that this resource can be harvested at its population peak for their consciousness. And since they can influence our consciousness during UFO abductions, communicate with us telepathically, erase memory, and so on, this would be proof that they have the ability to control our consciousness just like they control the Greys, or their ships. Humans could then serve as a raw material of consciousness for these technologies. They would harvest our consciousness, insert it into these organic bodies, spaceships, or other technologies, and through their own consciousness, they could then control these technologies and entities with a mere thought. This is how they could scale their vessels and technologies. The harvest would therefore not be a physical abduction, but rather an extremely sophisticated energetic and quantum manipulation, using the principles of quantum connection and remote viewing or telepathic control. The consciousness of all of us would thus function as biological software or energy that extraterrestrial civilizations harvest for their own purposes. 7. The purpose of Earth. If my theory is correct, Earth is not a random planet, but rather a kind of incubation station or farm intended for the production and accumulation of fragments of quantum consciousness. This means that the entire ecosystem on our planet, including us humans, serves a single purpose: to generate the largest possible amount of human consciousness, which can then be harvested and used. The Earth is rich in resources and wildlife, and humans have no natural enemy. It is the ideal place for humans to reproduce as much as possible, which automatically increases the resources that will be harvested. I think each of us sometimes asks the question, why would nature create something like us? We are the only organism on the planet that changes the world around it in order to survive. We are at the top of the food chain in an extreme way and are literally destroying this planet. The question is whether nature would allow something like this. If my hypothesis is true, it would make perfect sense why governments are trying so hard to hide this information, and it's also quite humanly understandable. 8. Hidden history, restart. You must have surely noticed that extreme dogmas exist among archaeologists and historians regarding our history. Any person who comes up with an alternative history is ridiculed by the entire scientific community. Such a thing is completely unacceptable for academics, because if there is one thing academics should be doing, it's trying to verify existing theories and build new ones. Our history suffers from memory loss, and therefore such ideas should not be absolutely ridiculed. But if the harvest has already happened in the past, it's possible that our history is being hidden precisely for this reason, because if it were discovered that we were a technologically advanced civilization before, people would start asking, what happened? For example, if a harvest were to occur today, a civilization 100,000 years from now would find almost nothing of our technology. All our technologies would be long gone, buildings would have crumbled, and all that would be left of us are legends, like those of Atlantis. The only things that would survive us are stone monuments like the pyramids, Stonehenge, and the like, which our civilization did not even build, and a future civilization would have no direct evidence of us. So if there was an advanced civilization before us that perished, or theoretically was harvested, all that would remain of it are large stone monuments, for which we still do not understand how they were actually built. It is interesting that a large part of megalithic structures have acoustic properties and were aligned with the stars, which indicates advanced astronomy, and often these stones weigh over 1,000 tons. I cannot imagine how people with primitive tools could create something like that, and what material would be strong enough to bear such weight. Theory: a catastrophe, or a targeted upgrade. About 60,000 years ago, something happened that nearly wiped humanity off the face of the earth. Genetic models show that our population dropped to only 1,000 individuals of reproductive age. Official science calls this a genetic bottleneck and offers theories like climate change, which I think is nonsense. Paradoxically, from this moment on, our brains and genes changed extremely, which suggests it could have been caused by an alien race. If it were caused by an alien race, it would make perfect sense. The population is drastically reduced, leaving only a small group of chosen ones. They undergo sudden genetic changes that do not have a gradual evolutionary curve. Immediately after the bottleneck comes the so-called Great Leap Forward, a sharp expansion of brain capabilities. the emergence of art, rituals, and rapid technological progress. Hypothesis of targeted DNA modification. In this version of history, the small surviving group was genetically modified. FOXP2, the gene for language and speech, its variant in modern humans appears precisely in this period. HAR1, a rapidly mutating DNA region associated with the development of the cerebral cortex. sRGAP2C, a gene duplication that creates more neural connections and a higher speed of information processing. Other changes in genes associated with memory, learning, and social cooperation. These interventions would function as a biological upgrade of the brain for the carrier of a consciousness fragment. If an extraterrestrial civilization wanted to make a change, the procedure would be clear. Remove the old version of humanity, lower intelligence, slow development. Reprogram the DNA of a small, selected group. Repopulate the planet with this upgraded version. Then the genetic bottleneck 60,000 years ago would have been the ideal moment. After the upgrade, the brain's capacity expands by a leap, symbolic thinking appears, and humanity begins to resemble today's civilization. The second reset, Younger Dryas, 12,800 years ago. Approximately 12,800 years ago, another event occurs, a sudden cooling and then a sharp warming known as the Younger Dryas. Huge glaciers melted, and trillions of tons of water poured into the oceans in a short period. Sea levels rose by tens of meters. This corresponds to the legends of the Great Flood, which are shared by virtually all civilizations. Mesopotamia, the story of Utnapishtim. The Bible, Noah. The Sumerians, Ziusudra. The Greeks, Deucalion and Pyrrha. Hindu tradition, Manu and the fish. Mayan and Native American tribes, myths of a flood and survivors in the mountains. What we don't understand about ancient civilizations and their structures. Transport and manipulation of huge stones, for example, the megalithic blocks in Baalbek weigh up to 1,200 tons, at Puma Punku in Bolivia, the stones are over 100 tons. How could people without modern cranes or machinery transport and place them so precisely? Extreme precision of stonework, the joints between stones are so tight that not even a piece of paper can fit between them, even though the stones weigh hundreds of tons. The surfaces are polished to a mirror shine, with no traces of known tools. Acoustic and electromagnetic properties of structures, some structures, such as Puma Punku or the Egyptian pyramids, exhibit strange resonances or electromagnetic anomalies, suggesting the use of technologies for energy or informational purposes. Construction in extreme conditions, megalithic structures often stand on high-altitude plateaus, in deserts, or in remote locations, which would have required logistics and knowledge beyond the capabilities of primitive communities. Astronomical orientation, many structures are precisely aligned according to stars, equinoxes, or solstices, which required long-term observation and sophisticated knowledge of astronomy. Unknown technologies and materials, some stones have unknown chemical and physical properties, for example, surfaces that look like composites or have properties of metals or ceramics that we cannot even produce today. If the civilization of that time was already technologically advanced and a partial harvest and restart occurred, the flood would have been the perfect way to reset it. A large part of the coastal areas, where the core of that culture likely stood, disappeared under the sea level, and with it, its history and evidence, for example, the underwater megalithic structures in Japan, etc. Conclusion. While this entire narrative sounds like science fiction, it gains seriousness when carefully piecing together evidence and testimonies of alien abductions and the cover-up of information about them. Whatever the truth may be, it opens up the question of what role we truly play in this universe, who controls us, and what the real limits of our consciousness and existence are. I would be very happy for any comments.
Are you a targeted individual? Have you had a paranormal encounter, or are the victim of an unregulated government experiment and would like to share your story with us? Would you like to send us some fan mail or a hate-filled rant? Do you have an idea for a future episode or wish to send a complaint to HR? Email us at atomicshameandsweatlodge@protonmail.com. Like, share, subscribe and be sure to check the notification bell. Follow the Atomic Shaman on Twitter at Motel and RV Park. Listen to Paranormal Green Text Stories on Atomic Shaman TTS on YouTube. Catch the live streams of Atomic Shaman Sweat Lodge only on Rumble.